we're going to create a new directory, and I'm going to do which is make directory. I'm going to go to -p, so there's, I think, kind of recursion in there. I'm going to call it .github / workflows, and that's going to say create a folder called .github and create another folder inside called /workflows. So if I press enter, here we go, we should see it over here, and workflows is in there. So now I can just go into it. So let's go into GitHub and go into workflows folder, and we do path. We can see that's where we are now. I want to create a file in here called deployment.yaml. So I'm going to do a touch and then deployment.yaml, and that's going to create a new file called in here. So we can just minimize all the other noise and open it up. So this is going to be our main deployment file for GitHub Actions. So when I push this up, it should bring it down or know what's going on. When I push this to GitHub, GitHub should recognize this as an action because it is in a sort of reserved name repository, should we say, or folder directory. That's probably a better way to put it. Okay, so in here, we are going to want to create the workflow. So let's give it a name. So the first thing I want to do is give it a name, and I'm going to say, let's give it in, let's do this properly. Build a Docker image and push it to ACR. So build a Docker image and push it to Azure Container Registry. Okay, the next step we want to do is say, when is this going to do it? What action is going to kick off this workflow? So I'm going to say on, and then we're going to do underline, we're going to do a push. So on a push, and then I'm going to specify the branches that I'm pushing to. Now, please don't worry about these sort of hovers or these errors. It just doesn't like some certain things going on in here. But that will all clear itself up when we finish the file properly. So in here, I'm going to do main. So I'm going to specify my main branch. So on push of the main branch, and we're going to come down again. And let's go back. We want to do a workflow dispatch. Now, this is a bit of an odd one to have in here, but there's a reason for it. And the reason I've got that in here, let's do that properly so it's under there, so it's in the right place. This will allow me to deploy it manually. So if I want to go into my actions in the GUI, which I'll show you in a minute, I will then be able to click a button and say, run this workflow manually for me. It gives me like an option to force it in a way. Okay. Next, we want to look at some environment variables that we may have in here. So if I think about what I'm going to be doing, I didn't actually specify branches down here. That's why it's complaining. Sorry about that one. No, it's doing something weird. There we go, main. There we go, that's better. So in here, we're going to have environment variables. What environment variables am I going to be looking at plugging in? We are going to be looking at the tag of the image. Now, this just helps you kind of not have to hard code so many values inside your workflow. So let's do tag, and we're going to say that's going to be v1 because we want it to be version 1. We want to keep it consistent. What else are we going to have? We're going to have server. That's right. And at this point, I'm going to call it DevOps on Azure -Azure cr.io. So I actually have this in a file, so I don't have to go digging for it, but you can dig for this inside the portal. It just helps with context switching here. I don't want to be jumping around too much. So that's the server name. That's what we're pushing to. And the image is the other tag that we're going to want. So it's going to be like the image name. And at this point, we're just going to say DevOps on Azure, and we're going to say EP1. So those are my environment variables that I'm going to be plugging into this workflow as we go. What do we need to do next? We need to specify the job. So what's actually going to happen? What do we want this workflow to do? So we create a jobs. We're going to say under jobs, we want to do a build. And within this build, I want it to run on. So we're going to do runs on. As you can see, it's already trying to pre-complete things for me, but I want to type it out properly. I want to run this on a Ubuntu image. So I'm going to say Ubuntu. Yeah, I really am not very good at typing today. But we've got Ubuntu latest. So that's going to be the base image for my pipeline. So remember, if we go back to my presentation, we're choosing the operating system. I'm choosing Linux in this instance. Underneath here, underneath runs on, we're going to have some steps. And inside the steps, we are going to do, we want, again, inside this step, it's going to be like a containerized or packaged up environment. We're going to say this one uses, and we're going to say actions/checkout at v2. And that just means that we're going to be using the actions version 2. That's what it's saying. Use that version of GitHub Actions. Cool. So now we want to look at the name of this step. So what's the first step we want to do? Everybody, the first step we want to do is set up the Go environment. So let's just say set up Go. There we go. And we can say this one uses actions/setup Go, because there is a predefined action which will set up a environment, allowing me to run some Go code. So we're going to do setup-Go. And again, we're going to do version 2 at v2. Again, it's just trying to do some pre-completion for me. I don't want to do that because that's when things go ski-whiff in demos. And I'm going to say with what version. So this is where I specify some parameters. So at this point, I'm going to say I want it to be Go version. And again, I always make sure I do these colons because as we proved last week, I always forget the colon. And I'm going to say 1.17. And that is because I'm using that. I'm keeping consistent with the image. I'm keeping consistent with my local environment. I kind of want it to replicate what I've already got going on. So what do we do after that? We're going to have a test. So remember, we built a test file. And that test file over here, main._test, is testing that we have a bunch of files in the root directory. So, and again, I always forget this one. So I'm going to say, why is that not liking Go version 17? There we go. God, YAML is fussy, isn't it, everybody? Okay, then. So down here, we're going to have another stage or another step, and we're going to call this one test. And in the test stage, we're just going to run a command. And this command is simply going to be go test -v, and then it's // and triple dots. And what that's going to do is it's going to find every test file. We admittedly only have one test file, but it's going to find it in our root or in our, the root directory, and it's going to pull it out and run it. That's what we need it to do. Otherwise, you can specify, you could just leave this as -v if you want, but again, that's just a Go. That's Go. We don't need to worry about that one. That's another stream in itself. I'm always very good at getting pulled into those kind of things. So what do we want to do next? Okay, so let's assume that our test passes. So we've set up the Go environment. We've tested our code. Now we actually want to use Docker. We want to use Docker to build our container and push it to the registry. So at this point, we want to say uses. And again, this is just specifying what action we want to do in this step. And we're going to say Azure/Docker login because we're going to need to pass it some credentials at this point. And I'll come to you how we're going to do that in a moment. But I'm going to use version 1 at this point. And I'm going to say this is with. And now here's my parameters, my bunch of things that I want to put in. So we're going to say login server, which is going to be, we've already got it up here, haven't we? So if we have a little look, it's an environment variable. So our login server is DevOps on Azure, period, Azure cr.io, or period, whichever one you want to call it. So this is how we add in an environment variable. We're going to do a $, and then we're going to do 2 curly braces. And at this point, I'm going to say env to specify I want to grab the environment variable that I set at the top. And then I'm going to say server. That is all I need to do. So the login server is my environment variable. Next, I'm going to need a username. Now, this is a fun one. I'm going to leave this one blank. And password. I'm also going to leave this one blank. I'm going to do this for a very good reason, because I need to fill it in a moment. So that is all we need to do is log in to Docker. So log into the registry using the Docker engine. I presume that's in GitHub itself in the action, which we're using. And we want to then run some commands. So let's go back. I want to run that one. And I'm not very good at that one today, am I? So we want to do a pipe, because I'm going to be running 2 current commands here. I'm going to say Docker, and I'm going to do a build at this point, and a tag. And this tag is what I want to call the image. So remember last time in my previous episode, we did a build of the main image, Docker file. We then had to tag it with what we wanted to, and then we went to push it. I'm going to remove that first and second one and just concatenate them into one. And I'm going to call it. And I'm going to call these the environment variables. I'm just doing one line. So I'm going to do docker build period. That's going to find the Docker file in my current directory. I'm then going to say m.server. And after that, I'm going to have a /, and then I'm going to do another one. And I'm going to want it to be let's do a space, m.image, like so. And then I'm going to want to give it a tag. So after here, this is just creating one big string with just inputted data from an environment variable. So it really isn't too difficult to do. And it makes it super simple having environment variables available to you. So we're going to do that one, and then we're going to have the tag. That's what we need to do for that command. Now, the second command I want to do is obviously the docker push. And we're essentially just going to be pushing the above image. So we just need to do a docker push. And then what I can do is I can grab this one, and by all means, copy and paste is probably going to be the devil of me one day, but we will just plug that one in there and push it to the environments that we want to. So in this instance, the logged in container registry. So it is at this point, I want to draw our attention to username and password. Now, the reason I want to do that is because they're going to be secrets. We do not want to expose these in the Git repository. Going back to the presentation, we do not want to have API keys or anything like that inside our application, especially not in Git or GitHub, because that's public. Everyone can see that regardless. There's tools to stop it, but we don't want to do that.